And so we are moving our consciousness around, if you will, to different places or points based upon emotional deposits that are still creative in our experience.
So based on that explanation, people talk a lot about dimensions and how a decision, maybe not a minor one like what you had for lunch, but a bigger decision of where you go today, how you interact, the energy that you bring with those interactions can change us and put us in different timelines, different dimensions. So is it conceivable that there are hundreds of thousands or millions of versions of Earth of which we are jumping back and forth between these different dimensions and timelines based on our choices?
Yes, that would be accurate. That is entirely true. Yeah. But you also have the ability by the bottle, by moving around, by moving your consciousness, and as much as you can, being aware when you are doing it, to actually collapse some of those timelines and therefore bring more and more power into your present moment. So you would be less split or less spread out, if you will. Yeah.
That's amazing. How do we do that? My guest today is Robin Jelinek, who channels a collective called Athena in Truth. And her abilities began at a very early age. And it's only with this perspective of where she is in her life now that she has been able to connect the dots. And by sharing her story, she potentially can help you connect the dots in your own life. So, Robin, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Lori. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I think this is going to be a fascinating conversation because we spent a little bit of time talking before this interview. And I want to share something that is always interesting for me. My life is so filled with synchronicities. And you mentioned something that happened to you when you were 13 years old with your husband. So I would love for you to tell that. And then I want to share the synchronicity that happened to me just last night connected to that.
Okay, sounds good. Well, we were just having a discussion prior to getting on this interview today about what was my earliest experience with something that I would have deemed as a spiritual experience. And although at 13, when I had the experience, I didn't really deem it that way because, of course, at that age, you don't really connect those dots. Now that I'm getting older, I'm starting to look back over my life and very definitely see that there were some signs or signals or things that were actually going on that led into a spiritual pursuit of life or whatever you want to call it. And one of the things that happened to me was I was in junior high, 13 years old, and our classes were unbalanced. There were too many kids in certain classes, so they decided to reorganize the people. And I was sitting in a desk and I looked up and I saw a young boy coming in the door, and something caught my attention about him. And I had a very strong and I would again describe it a little bit like channeling. It's more of a feeling or a knowingness. I think it's important to make the delineation that channeling feels like you know something, you feel something, but it does get put to words, but that's not always how it comes to you. And so in this particular instant, I had a knowingness that something in me said, there's your husband, take a good look at him. And I remember at 13 feeling the truth in it, really believing it. So much so that when he sat down next to me, I just casually looked at him and said, you and I are going to be married someday. That wasn't really what a 13-year-old boy wanted to hear, I'm sure at that age, but we were kind of inseparable from that time on. We did everything together and rode bikes and grew up together, really dated through junior high, through high school. And then we got married, pretty young. I think I was 19 and he was 20 years old. And we ended up owning a business together and we had 2 children. And now here we are, almost 50 years since we knew each other. And I think 47 that or so that we've been married, 55 maybe that we've actually known each other. That was, now that I look back on that, I think, how did I know that? What was that? Moment when that recognition came. And even to this day, I really ponder a lot how much we worry about our lives and what direction we're going in and what's going to happen. How much of it is really established or already planned out. And I would say I've had a number of experiences throughout my life that really actually did confirm that there's a plan or something that we can access from time to time that things are going to happen. They're just going to happen that way. And in some sense, when I can get my way around to that way of thinking, it makes me feel some ease, because we have a tendency as humans to want to guard against things and look out for bad things that might happen. And I'm starting to realize more and more that we don't really have control over everything that we think we do. That's how I would depict that.
I love that you shared so many parts of that. I feel like when you were talking about the channeling, what kind of came to me was that it's like clear cognizance. And I think a lot of people, when they're starting to uncover their clairs that they have, like some people see visions and some people hear things and some people just have a knowing. So it's like just knowing that that's true. And then I wanted to share the synchronicity that I had tied to what you just shared about hearing a voice, hearing something that told you that that was going to be your husband. So last night, I have a really good friend who was helping me with a project. And we were sitting there having dinner together after what we had worked on this project for a while. And he was reminiscing because his first wife died of cancer many years ago. And he is now married to my best friend. And we were just having this discussion about his first wife. And he reminded me that the first time they met, he had gone out like to a friend's house 3.5 hours away, and he was at this youth group meeting, and she showed up at this youth group meeting, and they met for the first time. And the friend said, "Hey, she's got a car. Will you take him to the store to go buy ice or whatever it was that they were getting?" And she was sitting in the car, he's in the convenience store, and she's just waiting for him. And she heard a voice, "You are going to marry this man. This man will be your husband." She heard an audible voice, and it scared her so much. She started the car and she was just going to leave him at the convenience store because it freaked her out. But instead of the car working and backing up, it set off the car alarm. And so she was forced to turn the car off, reset the car alarm. By then, he's come back out. And he said if she had just left, he probably never would have seen her again. And he just felt like it was so meant to be. And so let's talk a little bit about your view on soul contracts, because I think it's a great topic. And I do believe that we have these destined people that we're going to meet and connect with. We can, of course, use our free will to not engage in that, but I'd love to hear your take on soul contracts.
Yeah. Well, I think we have input on everything, and that would include a soul contract in the way that
Yeah.
they make us feel. So we would definitely attract a partner to us that would actually match us in the way that we feel in some way. That can be positive, negative, by the way. It doesn't always have to be a good thing. And so, everybody can have their differences, and that can be an aligning thing, as well as having your likenesses be an aligning thing. And so I'm under the understanding that when it comes to mates, when it comes to parents or anything, or even our children, that we are a vibrational match in some way. And so even like if we looked at our own lives, our friendships, or the people that we associate with and are very fond of and connective to, there are things that we have that are bringing us together in a likeness. And I think soul contracts or soul groups are the same way. I think you do travel from one lifetime to the next with people that are matching you energetically, and that you have experiences over and over again with those people. And I think sometimes there are others that are added based upon the progression or the changes that actually occur in you because of those exchanges. So that's kind of my perspective on that question.
I love that you just shared that, because it's not very often that I have a conversation where somebody brings up that our soul contracts are not just set in stone from the day we're born and we follow that, but as we evolve and change, we can actually call in different people to engage with us based on how we've grown, changed, and it's not a set in stone thing necessarily. But I think that that's a really important point, and I love that you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, it's really tied into what I do for work, or what I try to do, is make people understand that in their now moments, in their most creative space of their life, which is in the present moment, they actually have an opportunity to attract in something that would be coming in a future lifetime that they're going to like the feel of, based upon starting to recognize the things that they don't like the feel of. And that's a big part of what I do in sessions. It's what I do in assisting people in awakening their Kundalini energy, because that's a clean out, or something that would clean out your karmic baggage or the things that you're holding within you that perhaps have not satisfied you in the way that they made you feel in your life. So I think it's important that we understand how much power we have in the now moment by waking up. And waking up is I become aware of how I'm creating in my experience based upon how I feel in it in all areas. And so when I start to witness myself in that divine presence, because that's what divinity is, it's pure awakeness or consciousness, then I really have some influence over it. I'm not just victimized by it unconsciously over and over again.
Well, since you mentioned the Kundalini awakening, I've had several guests that I've interviewed who have talked about this. And this happened before you began channeling the Athena in Truth Collective.
Yeah.
So, will you explain to people who may not be familiar with this process what happened to you and how this was a part of the awakening to be able to be a channel?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I would say not every channel has awakened Kundalini, but those that do seem to be very spreadable or have the ability to attract things to them very quickly because that energy has magnetism. It's a magnetizing type of energy. And so it does serve you, and it also makes you a viable person that channeled entities want to channel through because they know that you have spread rate or the ability to spread very quickly, and they like that option. And so then, not just to be clear, not every channel necessarily awakens their Kundalini, but those that do seem to move very quickly in the direction of expansion. That's what kind of happens. And so I would say that the experience happened to me in my early 40s, and I'm 65 now. So it's been probably, 25 years or so since that experience happened to me. I was aware of it. I had been drawn to it. I'd read a lot about it. I was actually doing some breath work into my energy centers when it occurred, maybe for about 2 months. I had actually done some breathing exercises. And so a lot of people will say, well, should I do that too to activate my Kundalini? And, it might work for you. But what really works for you is what you're called to do. And for some reason, that's what I was called to do. There are many people that have had a Kundalini awakening and they've not even seeked it out. They just walked out of their apartment and tripped and had their Kundalini rise. So there's really no concrete evidence necessarily that any one practice is going to enact that. There's been monks that have meditated their entire lives and not gotten that activation. And so, my only explanation is that when the timing is right in the soul aspect of you, for whatever reason, that energy will awaken, and everyone will awaken their Kundalini energy at some point in the evolution of their soul. So when that's determined is hard to exactly know the exact date. However, one thing that is known is that when we become aware of it and when we begin to pursue it and when we begin to heal the emotions that are contained within our energy centers that are preventative of it rising, we can actually get that experience by doing that. And so that's some of the things that I do in the activation courses. And more recently, I began speaking a lot of light language. It's not something that I expected to have happen. I've always done it with my hands. I had no idea what that was. It was always signs and mudras that were going on very synchronistically. And it feels like I'm talking with my hands. It's the only way I can describe it. I didn't really know what that was. But recently, the verbal light language got activated, which comes with a very quick transmission after it of the meaning of it. And not everybody gets that. So I'm grateful that I do get that transmission of what it actually meant. But that doesn't mean that people are doing it that don't have a transmission afterwards are not effective in it. That energy really has an ability to help a human dissolve some of the blocks that they're holding that they themselves have had a difficult time letting go of. So it's just another tool in your toolbox to use when you're working with people to assist them in kind of pushing energy through their field and helping them to get the desired result that they want. And as we start to release that energy, and that's what happened to me. Mine, I would say, was more of a forced rise. I wasn't really ready for it. I hadn't really done a lot of observation of self. I didn't really know that enough about it. So I got a very dramatic, rapid rise with a lot of sensation, a lot of feeling of blocked chakras and it backing up and trying to go back through. And then I can only surmise by my own knowing that it didn't make it all the way through. I think it hit the heart center and veered off. And so I found myself in a very dark place for a couple of years, just a lot of emotional upheaval. And my kids were gone to school, and that was was something I really enjoyed. I loved being a mother and raising my family. There was a grief period from them leaving, but in some sense, I'm glad they were gone because I was not an over emotional person in the sense that I would be crying a lot or, going through a bad time. And that's something that did happen after I had that Kundalini awakening. And once again, now looking at it from a broader perspective, I realize now I have much more of a deep understanding of what that energy does and why it does what it does, and that it isn't trying to hurt you. It's actually trying to help you. But there's a certain amount of suffering that we hold within ourselves that we have to look at in order to release it. And that's actually what was going on. And so once I started to realize that, I can just observe the way that I feel. I don't have to attach to it. I don't have to be the sad person. I don't have to be the victimized person. I can just recognize myself in it, in awakeness. That's divine consciousness, and it'll do the work for me. And that's actually what started happening. So the more I started to move to be the witness of what I was feeling, rather than the victim of it, of attachment, the energies just started to dissipate. And pretty soon I started to enjoy life again, and I started to feel more balanced. Then I had another rise that it was actually one that came down through the top of my head, and it opened me up this way. And then things got much more balanced after that. So why did it happen? I mean, I can only surmise that there was a plan again, that this would be what I would be doing. And because I can really pretty much meet somebody wherever they are on that journey and really know what to offer them and to move them out of the place they're in or to get them to the place they want to be. And without having that experience that was a partial rise and was one coming down from the top and the dark night of the soul, I really wouldn't have that data. I wouldn't have that experience. So in some sense, I think we get it the way we're meant to get it. And a lot of people say that there's a right and a wrong way to do it. I don't think there's any right and wrong way in anything in life. I think we're getting exactly what we need in the way that we need to get it. And that's how my experience was.
Okay, that's fascinating. I'm really glad you shared that because you brought up 2 points I'd really like to touch on. I want to go back to the light language in a second, but first, you said something that I've never heard before. So I've always understood that Kundalini rising is an energy and it starts down in the chakras. So for those of you who are not familiar, you have a root chakra at the base and it rises up, it goes all the way up, and then potentially it would go out the crown chakra and it's in all of your energy systems. But I've never heard somebody say it hit your heart chakra and veered off.
Yeah.
And then I love that you said later, as the energy was dissipating, it came in from the top. So it's almost like it couldn't meet it this way. So then it
Yes.
came in and met it this way so that you were balanced. So
Yeah.
will you explain that for those people who are watching who maybe have had an experience and they're searching for what in the world do I do? I love that you shared how you did a non-attachment, but I think that that's one of the most difficult spiritual lessons to learn in this human body.
Yeah, it's very difficult. And
Yeah.
especially when it comes to people you love or your own children, if they're going through something, to remind yourself that they're having an experience that's necessary. It's not a wrong experience or a bad experience as we're deeming it and fearful of when they're going through it. And so I'm not here to say that I don't have that feeling now and then. I do. So I'm human like everybody else. But what I have become better at is recognizing myself in that. And I've realized that the golden key to uh, realization, if you want to call it that, is the allowing of more light into your field. And that comes just by observing what is felt. It doesn't mean that you don't feel it or that you don't allow yourself or that you change it or regret it. It just means that you observe yourself in the feeling of being a human and being a mother if your kids are having a difficult time. And so that's what I've gotten better at. And it kind of does help pull you out of the that experience that's very painful and more into recognizing and really what I've realized in what is happening to all of us in any feeling of negativity. We're being notified by our source of something we hold that's opposite of its vibration, that's disallowing its flow. And so we're being called to heal whenever we get a negativity, whether it comes through our children and our fear and our worry about them, or whether it's something within ourselves that we become angry or jealous or unbalanced in. We're getting an opportunity to heal something that's creative in our experience, that as the divine part of you is trying to approach you with the nice feeling experience experience that it's made for you by everything you felt, it actually stimulates the energy that you're holding that's opposite of that, or disallowing of that. And so now that I've gotten that understanding, I really try to move to that as quickly as I can. Oh, I'm getting I'm getting a notification here of something that's preventing the flow from reaching me, and then I try to tend to it with compassion and understanding that it's not the wrong emotion, it's not a bad, and it's not really even the cause. It's not real necessarily, unless I decide to attach to it and attach to it long enough that I form it, that I actually start to get experience that supports it. I get less afraid of negativity and more confident in myself as a connective being to the source that I am, that it will do the dissipation for me. I don't have to do it as a human. I just need to feel my experience authentically and completely, and then surrender to this divinity aspect of myself that will come in and wash away that negativity that I'm holding on to, that's actually preventative of the higher level experience reaching you.
I love that because, Robin, I feel like that's the gold nugget.
Mhm.
You had this experience, you figured out how to navigate it, and now you're sharing your wisdom with the world so that people who are listening, going through something similar, can take the information, extrapolate it, apply it to their own condition to see if maybe it will help aid them in some way as they're having an experience similar to yours. That's
Yeah.
beautiful. So
Well,
beautiful.
here's where the confusion comes in sometimes. Sometimes, recently, I think I got criticized by someone online saying that I'm not clear enough. I'm giving general answers. And really, I don't know how I could be more clear
Right.
than the way I'm doing it. But the problem is, when one is unconscious, they don't have clarity. So they're in an emotional state based upon something they're not able to obtain, or they're not in a place where they can put that into practice yet. And then they're condemning and judging something.
Mm.
Might be me or anything outside of themselves as the cause for how they feel. People have to realize that it doesn't matter where you get stimulated. It doesn't matter whether it's in spirituality, or whether it's a grocery store, or with one of your kids or your husband. You're getting a message about you in all of your interactions. And so no one is the cause for how you feel. And so the universal part of you is, if spirituality is really important to you, it's going to use that. It's going to use every opportunity that it can to help you identify the things that you're holding. And it's not that you have to believe what it is that a channel is saying. That's not what it is. My group and myself would always recommend you to follow your own guidance system in a good feeling, and you should feel good in making another choice. However, when you make a choice to just come in an opposing energy, or something that's causing you to feel resistive as you're doing it, you're expanding your own negativity and not even knowing that that's what you're actually doing in that kind of an exchange. So I think it's important to understand that we are forever getting signaled about ourselves from ourselves, and that we have, of course, a guidance system to follow. We're not here to influence anyone else in the way that they feel about something. We are here 100% and completely to align in the way that we feel, in the best possible feeling that we can, so that we liken ourselves to that source energy that really holds the really nice experiences that you want to feel or have in your life.
I love that you said we are getting signals from ourselves for ourselves constantly.
Mhm.
Such a big deal.
Well, a lot of people maybe understand the concept of sending out an emotional charge, or an emotional vibrational signal comes out of you in what you're feeling in your experience. And then the divinity aspect of you, of course, receives that signal, and by it creates a higher level experience that's going to satisfy you in the experience that, say, you're dissatisfied in. But what they don't realize is that the divinity aspect of yours is also signaling you. And so as it approaches you, it stimulates you with what you're holding. If you were to ask yourself, anyone, if you were lacking in money, or if you were lacking in a relationship, where's your money? Where's your relationship? Right away, they would, if it were about a relationship, they might say, well, I'm a little overweight and I'm not looking good. I'm not this, I'm not that. But is that really true? Does it mean that every person that isn't looking 100% or a little bit overweight doesn't have the man of their dreams or woman of their dreams? That's not true. It means that this is what you're holding. You're holding a little bit of unworthiness. You're holding a little bit of a belief about self yourself that's not connective in enough love feeling to actually deliver the loving partner that you want to get. And it's the same with money. When you ask about money, you will immediately go to times in your life where you maybe saw your parents working really hard and they didn't have enough. So you thought that, I've got to hoard everything that I got and I can't spend money. I have to be really careful with money. So the human, when asked, where is something, is going to actually give you the exact emotional data that you're holding that's preventative of the experience that was created the moment that you felt the lack. So it's to understand we are instantaneous creators. We are immediately forming the opportunity for something to come to us from that very loving, high, powerful source part of ourselves. And we are actually giving the data on what we're holding that's preventative of us matching. So the love of self simply means that I love myself in every feeling that I choose to feel, because I become connected to my source. When I stop judging, when I stop condemning, when I start allowing what it is that I have in the way that I feel, flow just comes to me and the feeling just moves out of my field.
Beautiful and so helpful and so wise. So let's talk a little bit about this collective. So you call it Athena in Truth, is that correct?
Yeah.
So how did this come about that this group connected with you?
So I would say it was just a few years ago. I had a number of different spiritual type experiences and have pretty much been on a journey of reading and studying my entire life because I just enjoyed it and I loved it. It was a passion of mine. And I just was doing some sit time, I think, and I think I've said this in a lot of interviews, so I won't spend a lot of time on it. But I didn't always have a lot of confidence. I was chubby as a child and got picked on, and I was good at things. I was a good tennis player, but I could become easily intimidated when I didn't need to be. So I was a little frustrated this particular day and kind of asking the question of the human, where's my confidence? When's it coming? But at this time, the answer came through what I can only describe was something that was not me. I felt something breathe me, and my head kind of went back without me doing it. And I had that same, I think you called it Claire, what was it?
Clear, clear cognizance.
Clear cognizant. I didn't know what that was.
Oh,
Feeling
okay.
of how does it feel to be a woman in her power? This is what it would feel like to be confident, to be both feminine and confident at the same time. And I just remember being kind of stunned by it. And at the same time, some of the hand mudras started, some of this type of movement that I didn't understand what it was. There were lots of facial movements, like my mouth would be just like someone put my finger in it, would move it from one side to the other. There would be like not crying, but lots of water coming out of the corners of my eyes, excessive yawning times 1,000, like just in a yawn position until a release would come, which would feel like a relief, like you were releasing something. And I can only imagine that that was an attuning process or letting go of some type of emotions that were preventative of full connection. And then probably within a couple of weeks of those types of things continuing, the speaking actually started. And I would say that the light language that recently started is very similar. It's almost an involuntary, it just comes up out of you without you without you knowing what you're going to say, or without you encouraging it in any way. It's just something that comes from you with no effort on your part at all.
So who is this group of collective? Are they once humans and now they're in a different form? Are they angels? Are they ascended masters? Who do you
Yeah.
think you're connecting to?
Well, I think some of them have been human. I've gotten that information, and some have not. Some have not lived other lifetimes. It doesn't mean that they don't know what it's like to feel life. I think people would be very surprised that those that have been in life with them before, and even those that are maybe knowing them when they're not in physical form, are very aware and very able to experience what it is that you are experiencing. And so the best way that I can describe it is in the same conversation that we had earlier about things being an attractive quality. The essence or the idea of Athena, the goddess, being a woman both in her power and being feminine at the same time, that would be a connective thing. It would be a stream of consciousness that you would pull from that would align to a desire that you hold or something that you are attracting to yourself. And so I found myself in a connective stream of consciousness, of which the goddess of Athena was a part of. And so doesn't necessarily mean that she's the only one that's in that stream. Just like our friends, we have a large group group of people that we interact with when we are throughout our life. So there could be many that would be part of that stream of consciousness, but that would be what I tapped into.
So would you say this group is a large collective, more than 10, more than 20,
Yeah, I would
smaller?
say probably more than 10. It's gotten to the point where I'm not necessarily interested or asking for names. In the beginning, everybody wanted to know names. And you know, when you look at ourselves, who are we really? I mean, we come out of someone and we're given a name so that we can be spoken to, and we think that we are that. But really, in essence, if I were to ask you who you were without your name, you wouldn't have an explanation for me. You would be something, but not necessarily the thing that you think you are. So that's kind of the way that it's looked at. It's a name is not necessarily something that is really important. It's more of an energy or a vibrational level that we are separated or individualized by. Let's use that.
So are they on the other side where they are not in a time constraint, or are they in a dimension or a place where they have a time constraint that would be considered, from our perspective, future?
Yeah. Well, I would say that that's not really a conversation that I've had or even thought about.
Okay.
But I would say that there seems to be no time. I mean, they could chat with me in the middle of the night or first thing in the morning, or it doesn't seem to matter. So it doesn't seem like there's a sleep time and a wake time or anything like that going on. So I think I can only describe it as consciousness that is not necessarily in form right now, but is aware of itself.
So tell me the first time that they connected with you and what that exchange was like.
It was very arduous. It was hard. It was my throat felt like a lot of pressure and comfortableness. There was profuse sweating. My body was really having a hard time acclimating, and it felt like way more energy than what I was or what I was able to handle. And so I would say the first couple of weeks were kind of difficult because I didn't realize it at the time, but the more that you think about them, the more present they are. And so they're brought on by thought. And some people will ask, and I think I had an interview where someone was upset because they asked the group what color the wall was behind them, and they said, "We're not here looking at the color of the wall. We are like a frequency. You're tuning into a frequency. They're not necessarily now, of course." I could have opened my eyes while I'm channeling and been able to relay to them that the color of the wall was in fact blue, but I chose not to do that because I didn't feel like that would be a very honest thing to do. They purely did not detect the color of the wall by themselves. And so that's the only way that I can describe that to you. It's more like a frequency, that a radio station that you're dialing into. And once that frequency has been tuned into, you don't lose it. It's like they're ever present. I never have to doubt that I'm going to have an interview or that I'm going to have a client and that somehow I'm going to lose my connection. The only way I would lose my connection is if I myself started to come back in, if I were thinking or occupying my own consciousness with my own thoughts or trying to change a transmission to a way that maybe I aligned more to, I would immediately lose my connection to them. And it would be very obvious because the flow state would evaporate in that kind of energy.
Well, that's interesting. So you're an open channel, they're communicating. Are you hearing words and repeating, or are they completely taking over your body and just using the vessel and you don't even know what they're going to say until it's coming out of your mouth?
Yeah, so what's happening is, yes, that they take over my body. And yes, I do not know what is going to be said or remember what is said. I might have a brief memory for a couple of minutes after a session, and that soon dissipates, and I remember nothing after it. And in the light language transmission, there is an immediate knowing of what they're going to say as they are doing the light language. And I quickly, either Athena will do it or I can do it as Robin as well. I will quickly give the depiction of what it is that they have spoken. So I already have it the moment that they're speaking it. It's like it just comes over me. And now I have to quickly put that into words and give it to whoever I'm in exchange with. So kind of two things going on in that regard.
That sounds like a download because I've had that as well, where all of a sudden you don't know something and then you have a whole flood of information and it
Mhm.
could take you 5 minutes or 10 minutes to actually explain in words what you got in an instance. So it's much like that, it sounds like.
Yeah, and one of the things I can get criticized for is the speed at which I channel, and the light language is even worse. It's so fast that I have to speak so fastly because the next one is coming and the next one is coming, and it's almost like you can only hold on to so much information or only hold so much at a time, and you have to unload it. So some people get upset about that and say, "Well, can you talk less fast or slow that down?" And
You're
I've
like,
tried to
no.
send I've tried to send that message and it just doesn't seem to get answered. The only thing I can recommend is that they slow the speed down on their computer, and a lot of people have done that.
Oh,
The good
yeah.
thing is when you have an hour session, you get through a lot of ground because it's moving at a very rapid rate. But I don't have control over that, unfortunately.
So, Robin, I told you that I wanted to come back to this, and I'm glad that you've brought it up a couple of times again. So let's talk a little bit about light language. I have never had a conversation in the well over 200 interviews I've done about light language with anyone. But a week ago, I was on a 2-week trip in Egypt with a very large group of spiritual people, spiritual inclination. And when we were in this session, there's a guy named Matthias De Stefano, and people who have
Yes.
watched
Yeah,
Gaia and may be familiar with him. And he was
absolutely.
doing this meditation with our group. And then he got to this point where it was silent. And I opened my eyes and he was doing this. And I had never seen anybody do that before, but I immediately knew it was light language. And
Mhm.
then the same thing happened in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. There were a group of 50 of us, and there were several people who were conducting and talking with their hands. And I knew that they were doing light language, but I really don't know very much about it. So, for the people who are watching, and this is a new concept and they've not really been exposed to it very much, what would you want them to know and understand about what light language is and how it works?
Yeah, I think light language is universal. I think every human
Mm.
has the ability to receive it and use it for communication. I think in the future, more and more people are going to start speaking light language. I think people are going to become telepathic. You will have an individualistic way of speaking that will be understood by all, that everybody will be able to perceive telepathically what it is that you're transmitting or saying. And so that's the way that I would describe it. I think light language has the ability to remove energetic blockages or things that have been in the lineage or in you for a very long time that maybe you have struggled with. I think it's the language of the soul. I think it's very valuable. I think it can induce states of release sometimes that are uncomfortable. I've had those myself since it started. You can think that you have it together or that you've cleaned out a lot of garbage, but you find out that inside that vessel, there are a lot of energy centers that you were not aware of that are capable of holding emotion that you've had from many lifetimes and even from your lineage. And so light language has the ability to actually start to eliminate or release things from your field that have kind of held you captive from one lifetime to the next. And so I'm fairly new to it, but what I have experienced myself with it is a little bit of suffering. There is, but once you recognize, I just started, as soon as I started speaking light language, I started feeling some of the old emotions that I felt I had dealt with, but there were still remnants of them within myself that started to make themselves known to me. And the minute that I accepted and surrendered to those as, okay, this is what's happening, this is a good thing. I don't have to look at this as, again, suffering or something bad. I can just notice and be consciously aware that there is a force now that is moving through me and assisting me in letting go of a lot of things that are denying light from entering my field. So, enlightenment is just more light being allowed by you. It's not that you're higher than or better than anyone else. It's that you've learned to accept and love yourself in the experiences that you've had and the way that you felt them, that you actually are able to release them. And in that release, in that that love of self, for just feeling, you actually become very connective to that light source that you're connected with, and more of that energy gets into your field. And so some of the things that happen in a rise in consciousness are channeling, are light language, a lot of nice things that people can experience by releasing things that have kind of held them captive can actually start to flow into you. Anyone can do this. It's not held for those that are perfect or have somehow gotten themselves to a place of not feeling. I know there are people that try to do that. I'm not necessarily an advocate of that. I think that we are meant to feel, and that when we can start to do it with non-attachment, and that's not the human efforting, by the way, that's the divinity part of you gaining access to you and doing it for you. That's what actually happens. That you can get a really nice, lovely experience even being surrounded maybe in a world that seems quite tumultuous or difficult to be in, but what's actually coming to you is very in aligned with the way that you feel, rather than looking out in fear at some of the things that are projected out that are going on in the world, and attaching to those and making those part of our experience. So we actually have the choice. We can actually create an individual universe around ourselves where what we're seeing on the TV and the people that we're running into and the way that we're living our lives is very much satisfying and in alignment to the way that we want to feel.
So creating the life that we really want. With light language, one of the things I'm trying to understand about it, it sounds like you called it a universal soul language. And if I think about learning a language, you could have somebody who's a non-native speaker and they begin to learn English. And if you listen to them, they would be able to get a meaning across, but it wouldn't have the nuances that a language, somebody who is a native speaker and spoke it their whole lives. And so you have different levels of language and the ability to perceive the language. So as a light language linguistic person who would be showing whatever the language that the message they're receiving, if somebody else who also was proficient in light language were to watch you, would they also understand exactly what you are understanding? Or is it very specific to the individual where you're getting whatever you need for whoever's watching and that's being disseminated that way? I guess that's the delineation I'd like to understand.
Well, I can only say for myself, I can't depict someone else's light language. I can do,
Okay.
but I
Very
can't.
individual then.
Yeah, but I'm not saying that in the future that isn't the direction that we will be headed, that
That's where
eventually
I was going.
it'll be a telepathic communication, of which it would be a universal language, although each person would have their own, it would sound different, but with it would come telepathy, or the ability to perceive. You know, I used to hear about telepathy a lot and about it coming, and wonder how that in fact was going to happen. And it's through feeling, it's not through words. And I would say light language is more an activation of feeling, of sensing, of just a knowingness that comes over you. And what's great about it is you don't make mistakes. It's not like words that can be chosen that could be offensive to certain people, or maybe not, or it could activate something within them. There's this knowingness, not only of yourself, but also the person that you're in exchange with. So it's almost as though you know the areas that can be touched and that can actually be not stimulating in a negative way, or bring something up in them that maybe they would feel not received the way that they want it to be. So it's a very accurate way of communication. And also what's going to come with telepathy when people develop it, it exists at a higher level of consciousness. So when we're in third density consciousness, we think that someone telling us exactly how they feel might be offensive, and it might be when you're in third density. But when you rise to higher levels of consciousness, there's new ways of thinking and feeling. So you're not operating from that lower toned emotion anymore. You have very high vibrational emotions that are available. So you receive people very openly, very lovingly, very acceptingly, and therefore you don't move to any offense or judgment as you might well have when you were just operating in the 3 lower energy centers or third density consciousness.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Well, would you be open to doing a channeling for the audience that's watching, just for
Absolutely.
the greater?
Yeah.
consciousness?
Yeah, well, and really, I'm thought provoked. So if you have something that you would like to ask, I'm more than willing to allow them to be present. And I don't take any time at all. I'm an immediate. At the moment I have a thought, they're in, and I come back just as quickly. I really like it that way because I can
Okay.
channel one moment and be cooking the next, and doesn't seem to matter. I don't have a prep time really that goes on. So yeah, we'll just go.
And the main person who will speak through you is
Yeah,
Athena. So she would be, I'll say
yeah.
she would be the representation of that collective.
Yes, yeah, they would definitely have input. And actually, when I'm in sessions, she would be what you would call the speaker of the house, but that doesn't mean that you would not be accessing one of the other energies based upon your energy. That's what actually happens. So that's one of the nice things that keep sessions interesting for me, is that it seems to be different. Everyone's a little bit different based upon the person, and where their vibration is at or what they're stuck in. So that kind of explains that aspect of it to you.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and I'll have you open your channel and I would love to connect with the collective.
Yeah, well, the channel is open. Yeah, what is it that you would like to ask us today that you would find satisfying?
My first question to you would be, do you have a statement for the collective who is tuned in right now watching this today?
Well, our biggest statement would be the creative value that you have, that you offer the world in the way that you feel, is one of the most important things that you have access to. So there are many in your world right now that are living in fear, that are making predictions of fear-based things that are coming. And our question always in that is, what's one to do with that? What benefit is that, and how is it serving you? Well, it is serving you in one sense because it can alert you to some of the emotional data in the way that you feel. Most people, when they listen to things that are fearful, it stimulates a fear within them. And so now you have something to tend to, you have something to look at, rather than believing that there's going to be an outside cause for your fear. We would tell you that anything that you are listening to that evokes fear within you is something that you need to tend to within yourself and not worry so much about the outside cause of it, you see.
Thank you so much. I'm really feel very grateful to be able to connect with you today. One of the things that I feel is happening on our planet is that we are going through what people have called the Great Awakening. So, would you like to speak to what is happening in the planet as far as consciousness is concerned right now?
Mhm. Well, it would be no different than a human that has a Kundalini awakening. If you were to look at the earth, there is, in a sense, an earthly Kundalini awakening that is occurring. So it is becoming a revealing process of all the things that are maintained or held upon the earth that are actually in a lower vibration or tone are coming up to the surface or up to notice to be released. Yeah. And so, once again, as we stated earlier in the interview, the way to release something is not through fear. It is not through expanding negativity. It is through recognizing that everything that you are seeing is a good thing and that it is coming up for review to be released. And that in your trust and in your believability, and actually in your state of calm, yeah, you will actually speed that energy out of the field very quickly. And then you could reveal to yourself the new world, or the world that exists, that has been created by everything that has been felt. You see, there is a higher reality that stands. There's one that exists. But the people that are in fear are holding the present reality, the third density reality that they are seeing, into place by those fears, by those concerns, and by that lack of trust and in that believability that there is a source part of you that has received you. So our advice to you would be to pay attention to how you feel, eliminate the idea that there is an outside cause for it, and go within yourself and heal yourself. And therefore, you will be able to assist the plane or the earth to revealing to itself the new earth that exists because of what was felt.
Thank you for that. Since you mentioned the earth, I would love to hear from your perspective. What is our planet that we're living on? What is the earth? And what is the reason that we're allowed to be in this place at this time?
Hmm. Well, every planet is an experiential plane or something that is used for expansion of consciousness, or for the one thing, as you would call it, to know itself in the expression of itself in many different avenues. And so Earth is a planet that is a very dense planet. It is one where there is a vast variety of feelings and emotions and lower density feelings. And this gives an opportunity for great growth and for great expansion. And we would tell you there are galaxies upon galaxies. Earth is not the only place where you are expressing. You are expressing in many planes at the same time as you are in this one. And it is to remember that you are one thing that is split into many things. So this idea of a separation or an individualistic you is not an accurate one. You are a fractal or a piece of the whole, a divine being that is expressing itself in multitudes of ways on many different planes of existence at one time. And that is, to explain it to you any differently than that, we know that this is not what a human would call clear or precise, but it is the only way that we can depict it in a human way, our human understanding that we could give it to you in, you see.
I see. So from your perspective, where you are in a place of no time, correct? You're not in a linear time constraint the way that we are. Is that accurate to say?
Well, in some sense, you're not either. You're perceiving yourself as in time, but everything exists all at one time. And so if you were to look at your life as an extensive sidewalk where every minute and every experience that you've ever had still exists in the present moment, then it would be a more accurate view of what actually exists. When a human is in the present moment, they are creating out there, pushing that sidewalk out further, and they are making opportunities for expression or other lifetimes that they're going to be entering into based upon an attractive quality in the way that they feel in the life that their lives that they are living in. And so the same thing happens when a human goes unconscious, when they get stimulated perhaps by an emotion that causes them to leave the present moment. They travel to the moment on the sidewalk or on that timeline. They call it back in time, but it's not really back in time. It's you're being called to heal a place in time, what you would call time, or a place on your sidewalk that this emotion was formed or is still creative from. And so we are moving our consciousness around, if you will, to different places or points based upon emotional deposits that are still creative in our experience.
So based on that explanation, people talk a lot about dimensions and how a decision, maybe not a minor one like what you had for lunch, but a bigger decision of where you go today, how you interact, the energy that you bring with those interactions can change us and put us in different timelines, different dimensions. So is it conceivable that there are hundreds of thousands or millions of versions of Earth of which we are jumping back and forth between these different dimensions and timelines based on our choices?
Yes, that would be accurate. That is entirely true. Yeah. But you also have the ability by the bobble, by moving around, by moving your consciousness, and as much as you can being aware when you are doing it, to actually collapse some of those timelines and therefore bring more and more power into your present moment. So you would be less split or less spread out, if you will. Yeah.
That's amazing. How do we do that?
Well, through conscious awareness of how one feels, this is a call to healing. It's what we described earlier, Robin described earlier in the interview, where you have an opportunity rather than to go move to unconsciousness and suffering in a negativity that you are feeling, that you move to a positive, grateful, appreciative feeling for being shown that emotion that is actually coming forward to be collapsed or healed. When you move to the love of self in what was felt and in the recognition that you're only feeling negative in the present moment because you have allowed yourself to move to a moment that you suffered in, you have the ability in that awakeness, in that divinity consciousness, to dissolve that place on your timeline and move back to the present moment, you see.
I see. Since our time is still linear from our perspective, I would love for you to share one last positive message of something you feel is very relevant for the people who are watching today and in the future.
Yeah. The most relevant thing that you could ever discover about yourself is the realization of who you are, what you are, and how you create. And that discovery can be made simply in the observation of yourself in the way that you have done it or the way you are doing it. Because that is creative value. That is not negative. That is not the wrong creation. It's an unconscious creation. but it is still applicable, you see. We want you to be able to look at your life in all areas and decide whether you are satisfied in it or not, and then recognize the emotions that are brought up in you that are actually creating that reality. And as you love yourself in consciousness, in awareness, and in awakeness, the divinity aspect of you will flow through you, and it will actually give you the ability to start letting go of those things in a lower tone that are bringing those creations to you. So you are always a creator, and you are always becoming more, but you cannot receive the more or see it in form unless you become a match to the source's unconditional love that it holds for you. The way to obtain that match is through the love of self. That means I must love myself in some of the things that I deem as faulty. I must love myself in some of the things that I look at that I think that I have done wrong. I must love myself in some of the stinky, nasty feelings that I have in jealousy, in rage, in anger, in all those ways. Because if I decide to condemn, if I decide to judge, I will hold that energy in a lower tone, and I will prevent the higher tone vibrational formed response or solution that the universe holds for me to reach me, you see. So our message to you would be one of surrender, one of acceptance, one of love, one of understanding what it takes to be a human, one of allowing. And in that energy, this is how you will be received. What can the universe give you when it receives that feeling from you but love?
Well, thank you. When you say it that way, you make it sound all so simple. I wish it felt like it was that simple. But I wanted to thank you very much, Athena, and your collective for
Let's just
connecting.
comment on what isn't simple.
What's that?
Let's just comment on that for a moment.
Okay.
Why does it seem hard? Because you're trying to do it. Because you think somehow, as a human, you're going to do it. You are unconscious in that statement because you don't do it. You surrender to it in the way that it is. And in that surrender, you allow the divinity aspect of you to access you and take care of all your problems for you, you see.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I see. Thank you for sharing the wisdom. Can you bring Robin back?
Yeah, I'm back.
You're back.
Mhm.
So how do you feel after that exchange?
Really nothing. I mean, I just feel totally normal. For me, I don't really, I will tell you that the light language, it gives me a lift. I can definitely feel that, a difference and actually sometimes I use it a lot around the house or with my husband or sometimes with my kids. And I feel sometimes it's almost an easier transmission if you can imagine that. It's just kind of strange how it works. But I can very much tell that they would describe that light language as more the difference between having your computer plugged into your router or being on Wi-Fi. It's like it feels like a direct feed. It feels like a very high vibration that comes through you when you're having that type of an exchange.
So everybody who was just watching that and listening to the wisdom of the collective probably was receiving some type of light language, whether they're aware of it consciously or not.
This is what light language sounds like in case you are interested. Oddly, it seems quite familiar to those that are listening to it sometimes, even though it is something that they do not always hear or readily have available. We offer this to you all as a gift, as a stimulation. A remembering of a language that exists, that is in you. Sometimes someone will hear this exchange and they will begin to pursue or listen to light language, and they will stumble upon their own, which has a very activating effect or a stimulating effect upon them. So this is a language that can be activated just by listening to it, just by being in the presence of it. That is our gift to you, you see.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Well, Robin, I would imagine that people who are watching are probably very intrigued by this, intrigued by some of the concepts that you're teaching, how you're assisting people with Kundalini awakening, and then having sessions where they can have their own questions answered by the council. So, what is the best way for people to connect with you?
Yeah. Well, I have a website. It's called athenaintruth.com. And I also have a second website, which is athenauniverse.com. The difference is one has my courses, my private sessions. We do group Kundalini activations about once a month, 20 people at a time. We try to keep the group smaller for that. I do individual Kundalini sessions just on Fridays. They book pretty well out in advance. And then I do private sessions on certain days of the week. The Athena universe is more of automatic writing transmissions, recorded transmissions that come from Athena to memberships that people have. And I also do an Ask Athena option. If someone doesn't want to book a whole session, they can have a mail-in question that they can do on that platform. So it's kind of two different things that I have coming on, but they can find all that on the Athena in Truth website. Everything would be available on there.
Okay, that's amazing. Well, I'll make sure that everybody can access those links in the comments below. And I just want to say, Robin, thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you for what you are doing to wake up the collective. You have a lot of information that people can connect to. And I love that you're sharing this light language. So it's just going out into the collective to do whatever it needs for people who are searching for some type of answer or some type of connection.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
And thank you everybody for watching.
Thank you.
Next up, check out this playlist of other NDE interviews. Please like and subscribe. It really helps this channel to grow so I can bring you more content. Thank you for watching. I'm so glad you're here.